Oh yeah. Hey yo, it's the Russo Show. Hey yo, it's the Russo Show.
Hello and welcome to Pizza Film School. This season, we're exploring the world of AGBO's essential creative partners. These talented individuals work their magic behind the scenes, contributing their expertise to the variety of components involved in creating a film. Today, we have the honor of introducing you to an incredible talent whose editing skills have left an indelible mark on some of the biggest and best films of our time. Please give a warm welcome to the amazing Jeff Ford, the brilliant film editor behind the Avengers series, Public Enemy, and our upcoming film, The Electric State. Jeff has seamlessly woven together unforgettable moments and heart-pounding action. He even came up with Iron Man's iconic final line in Avengers Endgame. Thrilled to have you here, Jeff, and we can't wait to dive into our first film together, Captain America: Winter Soldier.
Jeff Ford.
Hey. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. This is fantastic.
So we are currently working on a movie with Jeff called The Electric State. We just walked over to this stage and set from the edit room to enjoy pizza from Triple Beam Pizza.
And we're all, by the way, we're all having a beer from Creature Comforts.
Yes, we are.
Which is open in Los Angeles by the time this comes out. So, Jeff, tell us a little bit. We always start off talking about how you got into the business. Where did it start? Did it start with, as a child, were you obsessed with film?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. This is fantastic.
Thank you for being here.
I love hanging out with you guys, as you know, because we've spent a lot of time together over the years. How I got started, I guess, I don't remember what really set me off, but I was really into comic books. I was really into science fiction and fantasy. And, I loved Lucas and Spielberg movies. And so, fourth grade, I decided to start making some films, and my dad had a Super 8 camera, so I grabbed the Super 8 camera, and my brother and I started making these films. And my mom made us a Spider-Man costume, so they were all Spider-Man movies. So I've been doing the same thing since I was in fourth grade, basically.
Was it a dream to make a Spider-Man film?
It was, absolutely. It was totally insane that I finally got to make a real Spider-Man film with John Watts. It was just fun to do. It was like a project to figure out how to write a script, how to shoot it, how to cut it together. Sometimes we cut in camera, sometimes I did, had a Pre-Vis splicer and cut the Super 8 film. Do the soundtrack, do the music, all that stuff. That joy of doing it just never left. I always just found it really exciting. For a while I was toying with the idea of going into journalism out of high school, but I decided, the thing that I loved doing the most was making films. And I liked that more than writing, even though it included writing. And so I took a chance and I just went for it and decided to go to USC Film School.
If you could describe in a couple sentences what you think the essence of editing is, what is that to you?
For me, editing is writing. Basically, it is an extension of the writing process. I think understanding screenplay structure and story structure is critical if you want to be a narrative film editor. You have to know how to do it. You have to understand how it works, how to break it, how to repair it. Certainly it has a component too that's musical. There's a rhythm to things when you tell a story, when you write a song, when you use a piece of music. And acting would be the third element, I would say, for at least the kind of editing that I do. And understanding how acting works and how it can be good and how it can be bad. And the only way to do that is to have done a little bit of it.
How often have you worked on a project where it was edited in the exact structure of the screenplay as written when the film was shot?
Oh, yeah, almost never. The process is about writing and rewriting, and that's editing and re-editing. I mean, you have to find things, and you can't find things unless you try different approaches. And that process of finding things is what actually unlocks the movie. Because as much as you can write a perfect screenplay, when you start adding a cast, a cinematographer, a point of view of a director, all those things change it. And as they change it, it has to be adjusted to take advantage of the things that you discover.
That's right. Anthony and I have the adage, you make the movie 3 times.
I think it's more than 3 times. So I've seen you guys work a scene on set, and you've rewritten it 14 times over the course of that.
And then you'll edit it together,
and then we'll change it
realize
again.
missed something, and then we'll reshoot it.
So you're open to what can happen, and actors need that. I need it as an editor. I need to be able to say, what about this? What about that? What about this? And that openness is what allows you to make a great movie, because if you're closed off, you're going to make only the limited thing that you have.
Right.
When you're open, there's all these new things that come in. It's like alchemy. It interacts, and you create this totally new thing from, this is bigger than the sum of its parts.
So Joe and I first became aware of your work when we saw the film The Yards back in around 2000 when it came out.
Right.
And we were big fans of that movie.
I love that movie.
You know, as we were hired to make Captain America: The Winter Soldier, we didn't have a lot in our history that necessarily spoke to that scale and style of film. But Kevin Feige and the Marvel team saw something in our passion, our vision for the movie that made them want to take a chance on us. You know, we had a team that we've been working with for years in television, shows like Arrested Development, Community, Happy Endings. But they were very intent on saying, hey, take a look at the people that we've been working with, because these movies are very specific in terms of their scope and process. And you guys may benefit from being able to connect with a few of those people since you're new to this kind of a film. And one of the great sort of opportunities that gave us was an opportunity to work with somebody like you, which was kind of a gift we couldn't have seen coming. What was your impression at that time when they sort of brought us up to you?
Well, I remember we were shooting Iron Man 3 in Wilmington, North Carolina, and Kevin came up to me and he said, hey, we're getting ready to do Cap 2, and there's a take on it that we really like. And all I'm going to say is paranoid thriller. I was like, no way. That's the greatest idea I've ever heard. They said, do you want to go talk to Joe and Anthony Russo and meet on this movie? And I knew of your work from Community and Arrested Development, but I hadn't met you guys. The closest I came was I was doing a movie called Breach with Billy Ray, and we were cutting at Universal Studios. And I used to walk by this cutting room for you, me, and Dupree every day, and I wondered, what's going on in there?
Yeah.
But we never met, but we were literally down the hall from each other, which is the way it happens in this business. You end up being like, well, I was just, 2 steps removed. Anyway, I remember meeting with you guys. I walked across the lot at Manhattan Beach, and I sat down with you guys, and we talked about, the pitch for Winter Soldier. And I was like, this is the greatest way to turn this character around, to change this franchise in the smartest possible way. I just loved the idea of it. But I've had problems in the past where I feel like I don't want to work on a project I'm not in sync with the directors on. And I remember I said to you guys, can we go to dinner? And I want to just ask you guys some questions outside of the whole, formal thing. Yeah. And you said yes. And we went to have dinner, and I said, so I want to make sure I'm the right guy for this job. I want to make sure our tastes are in sync, because I don't want to figure that out on the movie. So just give me 3 or 4 movies that might inspire this take on Captain America. And you said, well, The Conversation, 3 Days of the Condor. I'm like, that's great. Let's eat. We're done. I'm in. Whatever you want. Because I was literally like, you're picking the two of my favorite films, but also we just clearly were in sync in terms of the stylistic on it. It's like casting, right? If the casting's right, everything kind of goes easier. So when you guys work as directors, casting the right editor, and me as an editor, I got to cast the right director, because that relationship is what's going to make the movie. And the less friction there is in terms of us having to level set, the better that process goes. Because you guys know what you're doing, and I know what I'm doing, but if we're doing 2 different things, that's not going to work.
Yeah, we always refer to it as everybody's got to be making the same movie.
Exactly.
The relationship between the director and the editor is the most significant relationship outside of the writer and the director, right? We work a little differently, where the key collaborators in our life are so valuable to us. We also like to give producing titles, which then allow them to be in the process from conception until completion. You function that way for us on several movies, where you start in the writer's room with us when we're breaking story, and you're the last person there with us when it gets handed off to the theaters. And I think you could look at more famous filmmakers of the last 50 years and always point to a significant editorial relationship
Yeah, for sure.
in their life.
Yeah.
From Scorsese to Tarantino, and you can go on down the list. What is it about editing that gets you out of bed every day?
I have to think about it as filmmaking more than a compartmentalized thing like editing. Because in my process with you guys and with other directors that I've worked with, from James Gray on to Michael Mann, you're making a movie alongside that director, and you have to think like they do. You have to be, like I said, you have to be connected, understand the vision, because I'm making decisions on your behalf constantly. And I want to make sure those decisions are fitting with the film that you're trying to make. So the easiest way to do that is to make the same movie and feel that same passion and energy for the film. So I feel like that's my movie, and that is as important to me as anything, as an artistic gesture as it can be. Is if I had written it, if I had directed it, it does not matter. I still have the same level of ownership over that in terms of how proud I'll be when it's done, how much I'll defend it, how much I'll be disappointed if it's bad. So, and this is probably not the greatest way to run your life, but I just get infected with it. And I can't get it out of my head till it's done. And when it's done, and I move on. But that process of falling in love with the movie and being there for it, almost like it's bigger than all of us, like it's this thing that's just larger than the rest. It's this film, and it's making itself to some extent. We're guiding it. I think that's a huge responsibility. That's what gets me out of bed, because it's a challenge, but it's also a responsibility. Like I have a responsibility to the audience, to you guys, to the actors. If I mess up that performance, I would never forgive myself. When people give beautiful performances, you can't blow it. You got to get it right.
One of the things we're trying to do is get young filmmakers to think beyond the titles of the jobs, right? The notion of auteur can corrupt the essence of how great stories get told.
Sure.
By creating an incorrect idea in the head of a young filmmaker that everything is being done by one person.
Right.
And there are rare circumstances where that's true, and there are even rarer circumstances of where it's actually done well. Part of what's great about these conversations is being able to peek inside the heads of our core collaborators, inviting them in to tell the story with us. So it's more of a collective story.
Right.
Because like you said, you're making thousands of decisions, and we can't have conversations about thousands of decisions, but we can Vulcan mind meld about tone and about character and about the goal of what we're trying to accomplish with the story.
We often describe it in similar ways, the idea that like we want all of our central collaborators on a movie to be fully formed filmmakers themselves. So a production designer can't be thinking only about production design.
Right.
The best ones are storytellers.
Exactly. And that's true for every position, every single position. Your movie's stronger, the process is more robust and dynamic and fruitful when everybody's coming together as fellow filmmakers.
Yeah, I mean, I like the analogy of an orchestra, because that's a group of people that get together and all have to do a separate thing, but it all has to be unified. And there's a person conducting, but it's the sound is all those people at once. And sometimes there's solos, sometimes it's ensemble, sometimes people stop playing, sometimes they play harder, and that music is one thing, but it's from all these people. Yeah. And I think you have to be in tune with each other to do that, to play together in a band or in an orchestra. So like, I think the crew that we have on this picture and that we've worked with before on like Endgame and Infinity War, these are people that we all know how to play together. Like, I know when Castaldi's gonna be up all night getting the schedule ready for tomorrow and he needs something from me, I gotta make sure he's got it. He knows what I need. Like, that's what's so fun about the group that we have on this. So we've done it enough that we know how to do it together, and it's effortless.
What positions, other positions on the film, other than director, which we've been talking about, feel most essential to your process?
I'll say the cinematography, but the camera operating is a vastly important element to my job. And I've always known this. It's sort of this strange thing that you don't really think about. We lump it in with cinematography, but operating has rhythm, it has composition, it creates shots, it creates multiple shots. And the person behind the camera is inventing the units of dramatic action that I'm gonna cut together. Now, you guys have directed him or her, but that person is the viewpoint, the point of view of the movie. Good operating is like gold for me, because it makes my job not only easier, it allows me to do things I can't do with bad operating. I don't have to cut because it does that. Operating, you can direct the operator, you can block the scene, and you can plan it out. It's when the actors are moving that person has to make 1,000 different decisions while that shot's rolling. And movies have, just a different energy depending on that. So like Jeff Haley, amazing. The difference is huge working with him. It's amazing. We talk about it together on set. He's got great ideas for cuts.
Another storyteller.
Yeah, the intuition is there. And also, we're a team making this stuff. I can't do it without him. I really can't. So that's a huge part of it for me.
The best analogy that I've heard is what you said earlier about a symphony. There's no music without the team.
Right.
And the director is just a ridiculous person standing there flapping their arms, waving a baton. Right? There's nothing of value without the collective working together to create the music.
No disrespect to conductors.
Yes. Or directors. Maybe a little bit. Let's talk about the scene between Captain America and Peggy from Winter Soldier. This is a film that the three of us worked on together. It was our first time working together. And there's a very critical scene to this movie. It comes early in the film, and it grounds us in Cap's character and allows us to understand the essential problem of the movie. It's a highly thematic scene.
This is Cap, who has been frozen in ice for 70 years. He can survive because he's a super soldier. And he's reuniting with his old flame, Peggy. She's old, he's visiting her, sitting next to her. The blocking in the scene is very basic and elemental. It's two people sitting there talking for a long time with one another, which is not something typical in this style of film.
Right.
However, one of the actors who is performing in this scene is not 85 years old or however old Peggy is in the scene. So in order to create this performance that she's giving, we had to shoot Haley Atwell as herself performing. We had to shoot an age double, who we could borrow some features from as we composited her with Haley, and other tricks involved in this. So the question here is, aside from all the emotional weight and complexity that is unfolding within this scene, which you track brilliantly as a storyteller and a writer, how do you do that when you are dealing with fractured footage that's coming in various
incomplete elements?
Right. Yeah, where you're having to sort of manufacture, like what it will ultimately be is not going to exist until many months after you actually edit the scene.
Right. No, that's it. You're bringing it all back now. I remember this. No, but what's interesting about that scene is you guys had a commitment to use Haley as opposed to an older actor, and I think for the continuity and the story of that film, it's critical because she has a future in the story, and she had a past, like in the first film. The way that I approached that scene in particular is you watch the material in dailies and try to be open to things, not feeling, you don't want to get too dialed into the technical aspect of it. So watching Chris's performance and Haley's performance and listening to their dialogue and their readings of the lines, you start to feel how that can go together. And I think I used the sound and the dialogue more than anything to help start feel what the emotional center is, because that's going to be there no matter what. I think we pitched her voice down slightly, but other than that, that's the dialogue that she read. So that gives me a kind of almost like a foundation to use. Because the rhythm of the dialogue, if I close my eyes and listen to the scene, it tracks, and if I watch it without sound, it tracks. That's the goal when you're finished, is to have it work both ways. But I use that sort of as a foundation. And I remember there's a piece of footage there where Evans talks about how he doesn't know what to do anymore. It's Captain America, the guy in the first movie who did nothing but want to fight. And now he's lost. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know if he trusts his commanders. He doesn't know where he is in the world. He doesn't know what his place is. He's sitting next to this woman he loved who's now, aged, and he's not. He's so vulnerable and so completely lost in that scene. And I've got that one piece where he talks about that he's conflicted and doesn't know what to do, and that never changed. That was the centerpiece. I knew I had to build around that one line reading. It's a sentence, but it's the thematic center of the scene. Everything has to feed into that. Even at the end where it turns and realizes she doesn't know him and she's losing her memory. Like, just if you find that cornerstone or the, whatever that centerpiece is, that can sometimes be your guide too. And see what honors that and makes it work. But Haley was great in the scene, so it's all based on her performance.
And Evans, some of his best work.
He's incredible in that scene.
It's a very high action film, right? And so it was important to emotionally ground Cap. What's unique for the genre is this idea of this melancholy, waking up 70 years later. Sure, I can wake up in a time where it's invigorating and there's new technology and I've slept through a lot of hard things, but also the things I care about are going away.
Right.
And I'm gonna have to live without those things.
Right.
In this story, the person he loves the most is about to leave him. The person he loves second most, and Bucky.
Maybe the most.
I don't want to pick a fight.
He's gonna come back, right?
I don't want to pick a fight with anybody. But that's what's so beautiful about the story, and credit to Marcus McFeely for such a gorgeous script.
Yeah.
The two things that are most critical to this character, One is tearing at his heartstrings and making him long for the past as she passes on. And the second has been turned into the villain of the story. And I remember we were talking to Kevin when we were initially pitching on this and saying, well, this is very Shakespearean, because whenever the villain is related to the hero, for all intents and purposes, Cap and Bucky are related, you create a very dramatic third act. And I think that's what Winter Soldier and why a lot of people talk about it as I have very fond memories of it and its place in the Marvel Universe, is because of that, because it is an intensely emotional film. How early on in the process did you identify how critical those emotional moments were going to be?
You know, I had cut the first Captain America movie that Joe Johnston directed, and that movie also has a really emotional scene at the end when he's saying goodbye to Peggy as he's crashing. I mean, it's not the usual superhero ending. The guy makes a sacrifice and it's very heroic, but the tenderness and the chemistry between the two of them in that scene was never in doubt. I mean, it's what that movie trades on. And so picking up that relationship was clearly important. And also, you know, the Captain America films, the whole trilogy is all about relationships. It's not about plot. You know what I mean? It's about character dynamics. So the first film's really about who Steve Rogers is. The second one's about him having missed the 60s and the 70s and he's awake in this world that he slept through and has no place in that world, has no point of reference, but his moral compass is intact. He still wants to do the right thing, and he's that guy that always will do the right thing. And then you get to Civil War, and he's forced to confront that he's not perfect. And his relationship with Tony is completely fractured because of Bucky. Like, the continuity between those three films as a trilogy and the exploration of that character, all of his dynamics, it's all based on emotion. It's not based on, there's great fights, there's great action, sure. But that's not what defines him in those films. It's about those relationships. So it was very clear to me that that was important. I also love, the end of this film is great for me, really, really significant in that Cap's heroic act at the end of the movie, yes, he brings down the helicarriers, he stops Project Insight and so forth. He makes his best friend remember him. He reaches out.
At the potential expense of his life.
At the potential expense of his life. His desire to do the right thing for this person that he loves. He is not going to back down from that. That's why you love that character and continue to love him. And in the course of the movies, it's a really astonishingly consistent character that Evans did over the course of, I did 4 Avengers movies and 3 Captain America movies. And so I feel like I've cut every frame of that character, and I'm always blown away by that guy. He carried that torch. And I think the Cap trilogy, the 2 particularly that we did together, that's some of the finest, most complex characterization. I'm being totally biased here, but I don't mind.
It's all right, we'll take it.
I
We'll take
love
it.
that. That stuff is just red meat for me, that detail, you know, the character detail. And the honesty and the complexity of that, and being okay with that. You're not going to lose the audience. That's what they love. There's nothing the audience loves more than to see those tiny details and in his performance, and we'd spend time on them.
Well, it's really a testament to how important character is to storytelling.
Oh my God.
Also, I think like one unique dimension of our relationship with you in these movies was the fact that you did predate us within the MCU. And even though we were trained to come to the table with a new expression of what Cap can be and where he could go with Winter Soldier, it was really important. The history of the character through the MCU was critically important to us, and I think we leaned on you a lot to tune in to the weight of the character from First Avenger through Avengers, etc., to his journey to Winter Soldier. And I always really appreciate that about the depth of your experience with the character.
Thank you.
But one thing I wanted to kind of put one light on before we move on, you said something that's very interesting, which is because of the complexity of this particular scene on a visual level, sometimes you would just close your eyes and listen to the sound of the performance, the rhythm of the performance, the way the lines were connecting, the actors were connecting with one another through what they said to one another. And I think that's kind of a fascinating technique, and it made me think of a time Joe and I spent on set observing James Burrows direct. And he's directing sitcoms, and he would kind of set up the cameras, which in sitcoms is a very basic camera setup. You just want to make sure that it covers all the blocking.
It's very proscenium.
Yeah, it's sort of like this covers the wide shot, this gets them when they stop on this mark, everything is kind of laid out.
And it's multi-camera, right? So it's all being shot at the same time.
Multi-camera in front of an audience, etc. And then when he would get to the recording take, he would he would literally at the monitor, he would close his eyes.
Yeah.
Because all the cameras are now set, they're all working, they're all capturing what they need to capture, and everybody's hitting their marks. And he would literally, in order to know whether he had the scene, he would close his eyes and listen to the scene, how it sounded rhythmically, and you know, he was focused more on comedy in that situation.
I did a movie with Jeff Daniels, and he said Sorkin does the same thing. It's just it's like this.
Yeah.
It's just like, is the rhythm right? Is it hitting rhythmically? And it's so interesting because that is, people will handle a discontinuity in picture a lot more rapidly than they'll handle discontinuity in sound. Discontinuity in sound will take them out, whereas picture you can chop and jump cut. And do, you know, look at Scorsese. Those movies just they flow, but visually they're jumping around. Sonically, the rhythm is super consistent. So it's fascinating. I don't know how that works, but I know I use it. It's a technology. That's something you can say to people too. It's like sometimes you find things that you use. I'm sure you guys have your go-tos, and you can't explain why it works. You just know that if I do this, it will solve this problem, and you start to realize, and sound's one of those things. I sometimes go, well, and in Winter Soldier we did a lot of this where we had non-diegetic sound, we'd take sound out, we'd let sound slide across things, there'd be music that crossed things, but there's no other sound. Using that technique in that movie was a huge tool, because that film could have gotten oppressive very quickly because it's very loud, it's a lot of action, it's very dense. You can create space and structure by removing and adding sounds and being selective by that, and it makes the movie feel lyrical at times, and it's a huge tool in your bag. It's maybe one of the most important for editing.
Amazing.
Let's talk real quickly about the companion scene, I think, to that Peggy scene, which is Cap and Bucky at the end of the movie.
Right.
What's different about this one versus Peggy is the complexity of choreography. There's a lot of fighting going on, explosions, a lot of CG shots.
Right.
How do you stay focused on the emotional core when you're working with that many elements that, again, are unfinished?
It came together pretty quickly because the performances were really great. But then what you have to think about is we're going to distort these shots with camera shake and sparks, and there's movement and all this stuff. There's this giant thing that's crashing, and there's all these things happening around them, but nobody cares about that. That story's over, the helicarrier story is over. All you care about is what is he gonna do? How does he get out of this one?
Is one gonna live and one gonna die? Or
How is this gonna end, right? That's the question in your mind. And then you do not expect that he's going to win by losing. He's going to win by giving up. The guy that never gives up, I could do this all day, is not gonna do it. He's gonna say, I'm not gonna fight you. So once you figure, again, that's the key moment, the pivot point in the scene. So typically what happens for me is I go, let me figure that out and work backwards and visually structurally, because you guys give me all sorts of cameras on. I mean, that scene you gave me tons of cameras. I had 2 cameras, I had lots of coverage, I had wides and tights, I had that low angle when he's punching him. There were some specials you had. I just had I had a lot of stuff.
You did shoot the shit out.
Yeah, you shot. So, but what I gotta do when I get all that, it's not the best shots. I know, and you guys are never about that, but it's like sometimes people will be like, I got this great shot, it's amazing, you gotta use it. It's like, well, hang on a second though. I gotta visually structure this thing so that it goes from kind of the two of them at odds, going like this, to where it's like in tight, so that I can get to that moment. Because I gotta be in here by the end.
Again, the set we're shooting on consists of a floor that is largely glass with some iron crossbars on it.
Right.
But everything else is green.
Yeah.
So while we're shooting the scene, now these 2 actors are killing themselves on a performance level, so we have to be very careful about this stuff. But while we're shooting the scene on the stage, we're like, oh yeah, when you look this way, you're a couple hundred feet in the sky, and when you look this way, the helicarrier is
The infrastructure is above you.
It's cracking and spitting and falling apart. And honestly, and sometimes you don't know what the actual timing of the breakup is going to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When are you getting closer to the ground? When is the ship really falling apart? Part of, I think, we do love a lot of footage, but even in this scene, part of the shooting is just to cover possibilities as the visual effects develop throughout the edit, and all of a sudden we realize what we need where.
Right, and also when you put a scene like that together, a fight scene, you're not a travel agent. I don't care how he got from one side of the room to the other. Doesn't matter to me how that happened. What matters is emotionally how he got from one to the other. And you have to start losing that pretty early on in a scene like this. Like, in other words, the logistics are important. You don't want breaking continuity that takes you out of the movie. But the audience isn't going, hey, wait a minute, he was on that girder and now he's on that one, or whatever. Like, there's compressions that happen in that scene because you need to. and you go out and come back in a different place, or that you use a strong edit where you go low or high, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like perfectly matched. So I think part of it is that it's that emotional through line, and for that scene as well, sound and music really important. Like the structure of that Henry Jackman's score in this movie is like mind blowing. I mean, it's incredible. He reinvented the character sonically for score,
and with a very modern score.
With a very modern score, but also he's able to go from really assaultive and intense electronic music to beautiful melody lines, classically beautiful melody lines that have utter emotion. And I think that's the other thing, is dynamics in a scene like that, right? You have intensity of emotion, and then it just softens out and becomes this piano playing, syncopated with him hitting the river. That stuff is like, that has an emotional effect on you, but it also transitions you from one feeling to another. That's, again, example. None of that's planned. That's I did a thing, you guys gave me a note, I changed that thing, I did another thing, Henry gave me a cue, I put it in, we changed the sync.
Dandaloo gave you some VFX.
Incredible thing. Yeah, all of a sudden, that interactive process is how it found itself over that. You just have to be open to it, right? It's not like you're gonna go, it's gonna be this way. You can't.
And Anthony and I like being reductionist about things, right? Like simplifying or demystifying. In the simplest terms, what are we talking about?
Right.
And in the simplest terms, a movie is just a subjective collection of images strung together. And you brought up a great point when you said that the whole movie was in that final shot.
The shot is a shot of Cap. The Triskelions on fire, burning,
right.
And the helicarriers are gone, and Bucky's walking away, but he just saved him, and it's this reluctant walk away. He's not staying to kill him. It's a transition and a curtain on that act. Because the next thing that happens is an unwinding epilogue set to Marvin Gaye that goes through and sort of catches us up to where we're going to be for an ending where the movie has actually no ending. It has a launch to the next thing, which I also love. But the idea that you can get that feeling across, that's this kind of, until you see it. So Dandaloo had to put Triskelion in.
Right.
You guys shot that shot, and the river's an extension. It's not really there. That music ending, the fade out that I did, that's in slow motion, all those things were like, that's thousands of decisions here and there to get that shot. But when they all land, it does something that's completely unique.
Well, what you're talking about is, again, this notion of the film being a subjective collection of shots equaling a story. The story is the Cap virtually gives his life to destroy a corrupt government system.
Right.
And also awakens the villain. That is the essence of what the movie's about. And that shot tells a story, but that shot was the work of probably 10 individuals coming together in collaboration to help tell that story. And the only way to do that is everyone has to understand exactly what the story is.
Absolutely, yeah. And then also, when you think about decisions that we make in post, one of the things I try to remember is, don't make unconscious decisions. If you put that piano there, it has to have an effect that you understand. Like, it doesn't just end up there. That's something that we chose to put there because we felt something in that combination of images together. You can have an unconscious response to it, and you can have a completely pure response to what you're watching after you've cut it or scored it. Then you got to go, okay, why? And what if I do this? What if I do that? I break it if it goes this way. I break it if it goes that way. Now I know why I was having that effect. You have to kind of check yourself sometimes and think about, why am I feeling this way? When it's good or when it's bad.
One else, the other thing, you mentioned this phrase, I'm not a travel agent, which I really like. And I was like, if you ever have used that phrase with a studio executive in response to a dumb note, I would have loved to be present for that.
I think I have.
Okay, great.
There's always that thing, is like, how did they get here? It's like, I don't know, they're here, right?
Yeah.
Like, how did Michael get to the dinner with Salazzo? I don't know.
How did he get to Sicily?
We talked
They put
about
him on
it.
a
It's
plane.
fine.
He's at the
I saw
dinner
it.
table,
The
he's in the
U-turn on
bathroom,
bridge.
he's at the dinner
I
table.
get it. But like, there's so much of that with like, now wouldn't they, no.
Let's talk about one final scene.
Okay.
Nick Fury has left S.H.I.E.L.D. and is on his way home, and he gets ambushed by a bunch of quote-unquote cops. And the scene finishes with his first encounter with the Winter Soldier. And it's part of the onion, the peeling of the onion in this movie, right? The peeling back the layers is this reveal that Hydra has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. Unbeknownst to him.
And our jumping off point for the scene was always, Nick Fury is the smartest guy
Right.
in
In the movies.
In the movies.
He has all the information.
So if you're going to kill him, it has to be the smartest assassination attempt ever.
And you're not going to go halfway. You
Yeah.
And you can't give them any, there's no room for error. So four cop cars surrounding every side of that vehicle. A mechanism that tries to smash its way through, the defense shields on his car, right? So everything is clockwork. And he escapes by 1%, I believe.
Right. It's always the way.
Yeah. There's a different rhythm to this sequence than the other two scenes we looked at or talked about.
For sure.
Let's talk about that rhythm.
I remember the material was coming in, and it was just an unbelievable amount of material. Like you can't even imagine, because those cars are all running cameras. There's arrays. It's astonishing. And you just go through and
Hundreds of hours of footage.
it's nuts. And I just started pulling shots, not narrative shots that I liked, shots that had energy to them, because this is a musical number basically. It's narrative, but it's also if it were a musical, this would be where everybody sings, and it's all about rhythm and structure. There's narrative content to it, but we're stopping. It's a micro narrative within the movie. Also, as a film fan, I'm like, the first person I go to before I cut a scene like this is I watch Friedkin, and I'll watch French Connection and To Live and Die in LA, and those chases. Like that's the stuff you watch, because that's what you need to remember, like how it can be done with utter perfection. So I did watch those before I started working on this. And so you find the shots that are speaking to you, that feel kinetic and intense, and that work for his character. And I would start laying it out I'd listen to electronic music that had a pretty high BPM, kind of where Henry's at with the score. But I wouldn't put it on the track. I just have it on in my room playing at that pace. So as I was cutting, that sort of energy was always there. And then sometimes I'd turn it all off and watch it and see how it tracked. And you just start putting the stuff in narrative order and starting to see what the relationships are and what feels good. But it's a piece of music ultimately, so it's not, it has a visceral and emotional component to it, much more than again, like how did he get from here to here? Did he hit that car? Those things are all important, but it's the groove of it that really gets you that build, so that when we get to the end, all that stuff gets pulled out and it becomes this long, linear, both in shot length, edit choices, and sound, where you see Bucky. So the idea is, how dense can it be before it just opens up and reveals him?
We should talk a little bit about how complex a sequence like this comes in for you.
That's what I wanted. I actually feel guilty about it.
Because
I like a sequence like that.
If you think about,
Turning over
so
footage.
Anthony are executing all that footage from the time Fury pulls up to the cops to where they crash into him, and then as he speeds away, we're handing that off to a second unit run by Spiro Rosatos, one of the best second unit
greatest
directors
action directors,
in the world.
world.
We spend months preparing the sequence with him, working with us as another key collaborator. A lot of Sam Jackson stuff is shot on a green screen, either on stage or actually we shot this stuff on the side of the road. Not there. But somewhere else where we had time, because
not that day,
we were shutting down a major intersection in Cleveland. We only had a day or two to get all that footage. We had to collect all the pieces that we needed outside the car. So we're handing you that in a chunk. Then weeks later, you're getting the car chase in chunks. Then you're getting Sam Jackson's coverage in chunks against a green screen that all have to be comped in, and all the plates have to be shot. So we're now getting the plates of Sam traveling, where he should be at the right time, because sometimes we'll take a line like, the air conditioning bit and put it somewhere else, because it works for the rhythm of it and not where it was scripted to go. So the whole thing is just pieced together over months of time, and it's put together from 30 different days of shooting, up to 3 to 4 units, green screen elements, plate elements.
And no sound.
Yeah. And no sound. Let me also say this. When you're shooting action, you're dealing with a lot of kinetic elements, cars moving, people running, yelling, guns, etc. It's kind of what you have to do. You have to orchestrate it on a set. And sort of, you have an intention of how it's all going to work and where the camera should go and how to move the camera. But as you start to execute it, things change and you find new opportunities. So we end up shooting this stuff exhaustively. We do tons of versions of it because we're just chasing sort of that
new
moment
ideas, better
all
moments.
These things come together in the best possible way, and sometimes it's a process. All, like you mentioned earlier, all filmmaking is iterative. So that even adds to everything you were enumerating in terms of like the amount of footage we're handing you is just colossal.
And we're changing ideas on the day. Sometimes we haven't even communicated that to you yet. By the time you get the footage, but you're intuiting that when you get it. And he and I are also in discussion constantly all day long about well, if we change this, it's going to change that, and change it. And then we have to remind the actor to do X. And then when we have all this team of people on set that we can, throw ideas out at and say, remember when we go shoot Sam on the green screen, in this moment he has to react this way because we've changed from the script, or we've changed from the storyboards, or we've changed from the Stunt-Vis. And so it's constantly evolving. And this isn't even talking about Avengers, Infinity War, Avengers, Endgame, which is a whole nother scale with, it was like 23 days worth
If you just watched it linearly.
If you watched all the dailies back to back, it would take you 23
Without
days.
stopping.
That's just on one of them, right?
Yeah, that was. But here's the thing. One of the things you mentioned is since we're collaborative and since we're working together, one of the things I think we've done on all the films, we're cutting as we're going along.
Right.
So we have pre-visualization, we have all these different techniques, but the thing that I think has been really valuable for us is cut the scene, you guys see it, you give notes, then it's available we can talk about it with second unit, we can talk about it with the main unit if they're matching into it. We have that there to look at, and we can adjust it. And having the ability to see what you've done and what you like, that inspires choices and direction too.
No, it's true. Will you talk a little bit about how you work with, the stunt team and the effects team, the sort of less discussed groups that are invaluable to the process?
And also, let me just mention something along with Joe's question. We rely on you so much because sometimes we're on set executing and there's things happening concurrently.
Right.
The second unit's off shooting over here. The VFX team is developing something over here. And you've always been very active and effective in terms of, like, while everybody's occupied and locked to a specific location on set, sort of like communicating between all the various pieces that are moving at any given moment.
Well, I mean, I feel that's one of my responsibilities. As an editorial's a nexus for all the stuff coming in. What you guys are shooting, everybody it all has to make its way to editorial before it can be in the movie. I collect as much of the pre-visualization as I can get. Sometimes I get it all. Sometimes I have to go seek it out because it's done in different times. And that can be pre-vis that has been done as animated pre-vis. It can be storyboards. It can be stunt-vis where the stunt players work the fight out in a gym and photograph it and edit it. So I try to collect that stuff and build a layout of the movie before you guys have even shot, or as we're beginning to shoot. That's usually when it's available. I remember we were in Edinburgh watching a cut of Infinity War, but I don't think I only had about 40 minutes of it maybe put together, maybe less, but we watched the whole movie. But we had storyboards and we had the script. If we didn't have storyboards, it had subtitles and the scene description from the script. The idea is, like, let's put it all where it belongs in the timeline and start filling that so that when you guys ask, where does this fit? How does this go? And I can think about transitions and I can advise you, because it hasn't occurred to me that these two things butt up against each other and this image might be a great handoff to this image, or maybe we want music delivering us into this scene and so forth. So that layout process, it's almost like, it's an animatic, but it's even more than that. It's almost like a living, kind of breathing timeline document of the movie before it's made. And I think that's really valuable to do.
It's exceedingly important for us to watch stuff almost daily, because it's how we're processing what we're getting.
Right.
Because actors may make choices that surprise you, that alter tone, and you go, that's better than the idea we had. That tone is better. That's going to change the way we should direct these 6 upcoming scenes, right? So it starts to inform the movie that you're getting by watching it. We have to respond to the material in real time as much as possible, and you cut very quickly. Do other directors work that way as well?
When I work with James Gray, he does paintings of look frames. He does them himself. He doesn't commission them, he actually paints them. And there's a lot of them. And they're like storyboards, but they're just one image. But like I said, they're like a central dramatic moment of a particular scene that he wants. And it's about the lighting and the texture, also maybe blocking, composition. And through that process, he starts to understand what he wants visually with that. And then he does a lot of rehearsals. So there's a rehearsal process with the actors where you're sitting in on that and learning about the performances during that rehearsal process. But he doesn't do storyboards. So his process is different. It's much more, immersive in the pre-production. And then when he shoots, find the blocking on the day. Michael Mann will watch dailies intently as soon as he has them and send me notes immediately on what he sees in the dailies. Even the night after shooting for a day, he'll sit down and take his recorder and start recording notes about things that he wants to see in the cut. And I love it because that's like, then it's a conversation, right? He's saying, this piece is what I was going for. build around this or whatever. And then as he watches dailies again and again, I get more and more detailed notes. And then as he sees cuts, I get notes on those cuts. He has a specific thing he's after, and he's written it down. He's written essays about it. He's documents about it. And he reminds himself constantly not to lose his way because he had an original agenda about something, and he wants to remind himself, don't miss this. This is what excited me about that idea. And he's very specific about and certain things, not other things. Other things, the actors are open; they can do whatever. He has incredible trust in his cameraman. You know, the camera operating on his movies is incredible, as it is on yours. It's like, you know, he trusts people with that, but there are certain things that are important to him, and that's different. That's pre-production. But it's not so much about the logistics, it's more about like thematic ideas that he's carrying forward. John Watts will do storyboards, and then he'll do all the dialogue, and so I'll get a little cut, like a mini cut of a scene with him doing all the voices. With him, it's specifically like comedy rhythms or ideas for jokes, like how he wants it to play. He'll, you know, have that, and he'll give it to me, and I put it right in, because it's like, this is gold. This is from the horse's mouth, and also it's so clear when you see that, like, oh, I get how this joke lands. I get how this is supposed to play.
Whether it be writing notes to yourself about what's important when you get there, things you don't want to forget,
right,
or sort of extensive prep work, exploring how it should feel. It's because when you get to the point of execution, it can become very confusing on set.
Right.
There's so many things happening. The clock is ticking. There's a lot of distractions, and you can you are vulnerable to potentially losing your way. I think one of the benefits of Joe and I working as a team has always been there's a chance one of us will remember what we were intending to do at any given moment. But all these techniques kind of add up to that. Be prepared for the fog of war once you hit production, because you may get lost in it.
Well, but you guys also do this thing which I love, which is you fight. And when you fight, you're fighting over what to do, like how to approach something. Like you don't get into a fist fight, I haven't seen one anyway. But when you guys argue about it, it's a little bickering, and weirdly it compresses the decision time down to very little, because you go, well, no, and then you come up with the decision really fast. And it's fascinating to watch because you don't have to do anything. I go, okay, let him go. And then and 3, 2, 1, they got the choice, and then off we go. But having someone to bounce that off of has got to be great. I'll see you guys struggling with something, I'll be like, I know what to do, and then you guys will do something completely different. And I'll be like, oh, that's better. But it's the back and forth, it's the struggle.
It's the high school debate.
It's the debate that gets you to the answer. Because while you're trying to figure out what to do and what you're arguing about, you're actually having an idea.
But you're stress testing the idea as well.
Absolutely.
Right? You're beating it up very quickly, like you said, where he'll take a side and I'll take a side. And then we'll get to a point where we're like, all right, that's the better argument, let's do that.
Well, I do think directors have to be prepared in a way that no one else on the crew has to be prepared for, and that is to answer questions from the actors.
Yeah.
And those questions are going to be hard questions, and you better have the answer. Because if you don't, you will lose their trust.
Our answers tend to be very succinct.
Yes.
Because we don't want them in their head.
Yes.
Most of the conversation happens in prep.
Yep.
Or it happens that morning in a trailer before they come to set. Because once they're acting, you want to keep them fresh.
Yep.
You don't want them thinking too much. You don't want them trying to remember your 11 notes.
No, that's
while
a
they're
great,
trying
that's a
to
great thing
behave
to emphasize.
Truthfully over a 2.5 minute period.
That's a really important thing to say. Like an actor cannot process 10 notes, 4 notes, 2. One's plenty. They have a lot to do, and they're doing that work. I've seen it on dailies, where you watch the dailies go from, this is kind of interesting, and then it starts to become the rote
mannered
delivery of notes to director. Did I do it right?
Turning on this moment.
There's nothing there anymore.
Got your ear.
Talking louder on this line.
The other thing you guys do, which I love, is one morning we were working with Brolin on blocking a scene. It was in one of that throne room thing, that big set where it was Zoe, and it wasn't working. Nobody could figure out where to sit and what would do. And then you guys just just go through the scene. Don't think about anything. I remember this really clearly. And Brolin's like, well, where are we gonna stand? You just go. And he figured it all out while he was doing it. Mm-hmm. That was the blocking. Mm-hmm. But it was the process of trying to figure out something before you'd had the behavior that stopped it all up.
Yeah.
And I love how you guys give those actors the ability to have ownership over that movement, over those decisions and those choices, and it pays like a slot machine because they carry it with them, right? They don't have to be managed because they own it and they've developed it.
Our process is very performer oriented.
Yeah.
We love actors, we love performance, and we use the expression of performance a lot of times as our roadmap
Yeah.
to find our way through a scene. When you're dealing with great actors like Josh Brolin or many of the other actors we've had the pleasure of working with, like they're so talented, they're going to find their way through the scene in a really interesting way. You just have to create the environment for them to go and do that.
And in that particular case, it was tough for him because he was acting in strange
He's got a
VFX
hat on the
pajamas.
thing.
You're right. And he's got a crazy pole with a tennis ball for an eye line, and very little set.
He had less set than Pizza Film
I think
School.
there was perhaps an insecurity about, just as an actor, like, help me here because there's nothing here for me to interact with.
Right.
But we would use very demonstrative notes with him to make it clear for him. And he liked this notion that Thanos was a gangster.
Yeah.
He would activate off of very simple notes of like,
Intimidate
this is
people.
how, this is how a gangster would behave in this moment. This
Right.
is how he's using his physical and intellectual
Right.
superiority to intimidate. So we keep the notes very simple with him to not overcomplicate what was already a mercurial and difficult process for him to grasp. Before we move on to small bites and wrap up, I want to talk about one very famous line, the I am Iron Man line from the end of Avengers Endgame.
Iron Man's last line in the MCU.
Which was, there was an incredible amount of pressure. Robert's story, Robert's own redemptive arc, of coming in to play Iron Man and rebuilding his career, tracking this sort of really super successful experiment from the first Iron Man to the end of Endgame. There couldn't have been more pressure on what came out of his mouth in that moment right before he snapped his fingers. We tried 20 different things, including he didn't say anything.
And this started in the script development phase with Marcus and McFeely, trying lines. We got to set. Nothing that came out of his mouth felt like worthy.
So much pressure.
Yeah, so we literally settled on this idea, well, he can't say anything. It's, everything he says sounds
Rote.
rote or underwhelming.
Right.
We tried a few, I think, in some test screenings.
I think we previewed "You Are So Fucked,"
Yeah.
which I was like, "This is not
That's
gonna
how
fly."
that's how lost
That's
we
how
were.
desperate we were.
That's how lost
And
we
they
were.
were like, all right, we'll just do the first fucking Marvel Universe.
Maybe that'll be
it's attention grabbing. It was really,
Saying fuck is interesting.
Yeah,
right?
that's
when we knew we didn't have it.
We we tested with an audience.
Yeah, we were
They were like,
resorting
"That's not good."
shock value. And we were sitting in editorial, and I cannot remember if you came up with it in that moment or right before we walked into the room.
I do not remember any of this.
Okay.
But I remember what we were struggling with that got us to that idea. And I'm happy to take credit for it because I feel like a genius, which I don't think I am. Let me tell you what happened. We were shooting on the mocap stage with Brolin. We were actually struggling with what Thanos' last line would be. And I remember we came up with, he tried a bunch of different things with him too, because we thought maybe he needs the declarative line, right? The idea is Thanos would say something like, I am inevitable, and then we'd pan over to Robert and he'd snap. And when we did it with Brolin on the mocap stage, we were all like, it's weird, like it doesn't feel complete, right? And so the idea was, if he says "I am inevitable" and we pan over, which was a callback, he says it 3 times in the movie. That's the 3rd time. It means I will never lose.
I am
It's written in the stars.
It's written in the stars,
Which is the theme of the movie, which was, can you through an act of heroism overcome fate? That we wrote that on a chalkboard for 4 years of working on those movies. That one theme is what guided these films.
Right.
And so the notion of him saying "I am inevitable" was on theme for us.
Totally.
But it wasn't complete.
Because rhythmically, it's not complete. The feeling, even if he said ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba, you wanted one more phrase, right? Like just the rhythm of it felt wrong. And so I remember we were like thinking, okay, well if he's inevitable, who's he? And it just presented itself. Not only is it the greatest FU to Thanos, it's a callback to the beginning. So you've got Symmetry now.
Call back, to the first Iron Man film.
And each of these movies has been about him at odds with who he is. And can he finally be at peace? He's only that way if he can acknowledge that that's who he is.
Yeah. Well, and what's fascinating is that "I am Iron Man" phrase kicked off the frenzy of the Marvel Universe. It was a positive, affirmative, we're here. And now this is a tragic end of my life, broken. And Tony's arc in those 2 movies, he gets his ass kicked multiple times by Thanos. And I think what we wanted to show that was even the brightest, most powerful, smartest of all of the heroes against fate was almost nothing. But the will, the will that he had in that moment, and that's what that line represented.
Yeah.
Fine, I'll die to do this.
Yeah.
And that's why the line worked so well, and that's why it was so brilliant. But only you, having been on that journey, right, through almost the entirety of the Marvel Universe, could grab that and introduce it, and again, the essential nature of collaborating with everyone involved.
It's the thing we always chase. It's the thing we do this for, because you're never gonna, like, you try so hard to get it right, and then and you get the movie done and you're like, wow, that was really good. I can do better. I'm gonna try it again. It's that chase to try to make it perfect that you could never achieve, but I think that's why we do it every time. It's so fun to chase it.
So fun to chase it, and I remember the day when you came up with the line and pitched it to us. And it was like a day like any other, thousands of days, where we walk in the edit room, Joe and I sit down on the couch, we're looking at the screen, and you just say, hey, I thought of this line.
Is that what
and it was like,
that's what I remember, just walking in the room.
It was like, it felt so mundane every day.
Oh my God.
And it was like when you said the line, I know we both had the same reaction. It was like, all of a sudden this weight lifted. This heavens opened up.
3-year wait.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. It was perfect.
Well, I'm honored to have helped.
Yeah.
We're honored to have you helped.
Oh my God.
Okay, small bites.
Okay, what do I do?
Rapid fire question.
All right.
So if you could watch any movie or TV show for the first time again, to have that feeling of when you first watched it, what would it be? It could be a scene, it could be a moment, it could be an entire film.
Breaking Bad, the whole show.
The whole show.
Because I never knew what was going to happen next. And I'm never going to have that feeling again.
I love that you said that because I binged it.
I did too.
I didn't get to it because I think we were working on a lot of stuff at the time.
I did too.
And I watched it over like a month.
I did it while we were on the shoot for Electric State. I'd never seen it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I could not turn it off.
I got to the end of it and I was like, oh my God, that just had the same impact on me that The Godfather had on me.
Yeah.
First time I saw The Godfather. I was so profoundly moved at the end of it.
Yeah.
And my mind was blown. And we always use that as an example of what we call writing yourself into a corner.
Yeah.
Every episode of that show is so brilliantly written because it ends with, how the fuck are they going to figure that? How does he move forward?
But I never felt they cheaped out.
Never.
They figured out a way.
It was so
And you're
much
like,
heavy
oh
lifting.
My God, how did you think of that?
So much heavy lifting.
Next small bite. If you could work with anyone, dead or alive, who would that be?
I'm going to say Steven Spielberg.
Oh, cool.
And I'll tell you why.
Valid.
I've loved his movies since I was a kid. Obviously, a huge influence. I mean, and it's a cliche thing to say.
Yeah.
But I suspect, and I don't know if this is true, I suspect his process is unlike anything we suspect it is. I think it's much simpler. I'm fascinated by how that goes down. I've heard some stories, but I've never worked with the guy.
I thought that his process was very meticulous.
Yeah.
He actually goes to set that morning.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Because his shots seem so like a storybook.
But I mean,
his movies unfold like pages turning in a book.
But I want to see him go in the edit room. I can't imagine what that is. I know Michael Cahn's a genius, and I just worship him. But what is that like? What does that feel like? What is that process like?
That's a great answer.
Yeah, if you could give one piece of advice to yourself in your early career, what would that be?
That it is utterly and completely achievable, and it's much easier than you think. You just have to get out of your own way.
That's manifestation.
It's true though.
Believing.
If I could look back, I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't think it was going to be this easy and this hard. But no, you can't. It's your own. It's your own self-doubt that holds you back.
If you could take one thing from the Winter Soldier set, what would you have taken? One prop.
The matte, the desaturated stealth shield that he had, so he wouldn't be spotted.
That's right. I forgot about that.
That's right. So he can't be shot in the dark.
No.
Yeah. That's it, Jeffrey.
Oh my God, this was so fun. Thank you so much for having me on this.
Thank you for being here.
You guys are the best.
Amazing
You're the best,
talking
man.
to you.
I love working with you guys.
Incredible wisdom for a lot of young filmmakers out there.
I hope so.
I hope you all soaked it in. It's one of the true masters working today in film.
Thank you very much.
And we didn't even go down your roll call of all of the Marvel movies you worked on. Go on IMDb and look at every film that he worked on, and understand how critical a collaborator he was to, if you're a Marvel fan, to making your dreams come true.
And I'm so excited that we have many, many months ahead of us working on the Electric State together.
Oh yeah, we're having fun.
Yes.
And it's going to be great. So I can't wait. It's going to be great.
All right, mangia bene, everyone. Thanks so much.
Ciao, ciao.
Oh wow, yeah man, it's Pizza Film School. About to learn about the movies, man. Whoa, it's real cool.